had a pretty crazy situation that happened with my ex about 5 years ago. And while some people may look at it and think that it's not really that big of a deal, it seriously scared the absolute hell out of me. I'm going to try and not make this story a long read, but I'm a wordy person, and I'm sorry if it comes through as being way too verbose. So, like I mentioned, 5 years ago, I was in a relationship with a lovely lady named Elena. Elena and I were dating for about 5 months, give or take a couple weeks. I was pretty happy with her for the most part. We got along well enough, we agreed on most things, and I think we were both pretty comfortable with how things were going between us. It was hitting a point where it was pretty serious, and I was thinking about the future. I really thought that we had something going at around that 5 month mark, but then there's the story of how she became my ex. I showed up at her place one day to surprise her and ask her to go on a date with me. I was dressed nicely and ready to spend a good amount of money on literally anything she wanted that night, except I found out that what she wanted was to spend the night with her ex-boyfriend and not me. When I showed up at her place, I literally saw them in the living room through the window, and while I won't describe what I saw, I will say that it was pretty obvious that she was enjoying her time with him. It hurt, but it was one of those moments where the pain led to clarity. She clearly didn't want to be with me, and I could accept that. I actually called her phone while standing outside her place, and when she answered and told me that she was just watching some TV to relax, I kind of went into smartass mode and said something like, "It's kind of hard to watch TV with the TV off and your ex on top of you, isn't it?" She looked out the window and saw me, and I gave her a slight wave and then walked back to my car and left. Like I said, it hurt, but I finished that night out by going to a nice steakhouse with my mom. That may sound pathetic, but I took my mom out for a nice dinner, and I told her that Elena and I had broken up, and I just wanted to spend some time with her. She appreciated it. That's all that matters. Of course, Elena wanted to try and fix things with me and kept calling me. I turned off my phone for the night and decided that I would talk to her again the next day. When she called me and told me that it wasn't what it looked like, which is a great excuse when someone's literally watching the whole thing from the window, I told her that I didn't care and that she just needed to come over and get the stuff that she had left at my place. After about half an hour of arguing, I pretty much told her that if she didn't come to get her things, I would be burning them out back that night. So she had about half an hour. She relented and said she'd come get them, and I thought that would be it. I thought she got it, but of course I was wrong. When she showed up, she tried her damnedest to convince me that it was a one-time thing and that she had made a mistake, which, yeah, she left her blinds open while going at it with her ex. That was pretty dumb. I told her that I wanted nothing to do with her, that I was done with our relationship, and that I hoped she would be happy with her ex. It was then that she got aggressive with me, screaming about how I needed to think about what I was throwing away, and that if I was seriously going to break up with her, I would regret it. After arguing about that, she went into denial phase of things and started screaming that the relationship wasn't over because she didn't agree to break up with me. I told her that it wasn't a contract and that she was being creepy, but she just kept saying that we weren't broken up. I'd finally gotten enough of my anger out, and I told her to leave, and she just said okay, but of course, as she left, she tried to exit with an "I love you." I said a few choice words and admittedly shoved her out of my door and locked it. Once again, I thought that was the end of it all. I thought she would get it eventually, but the constant phone calls and texts proved otherwise. She called me constantly over the next couple of days. I answered one of her calls and she tried to give me a sob story about how much she missed me and was thinking about me. I told her I wasn't thinking about her at all, and that I'd never been happier now that she was gone. She laughed at this. She actually laughed when I told her that I was happy without her, and said that I was being so silly, in her words. After I stopped answering her calls and texts, I started getting calls from people I knew. My mom called me asking why she was calling her. My brother said that she had showed up at his house an hour away and asked him if he'd spoken to me. She'd only been to his house once, and that was near the beginning of our relationship. So I was surprised that she remembered how to get there. I got a call from a couple of my pals saying that she was texting them, asking them to call me and tell me to talk to her. It really hit the pinnacle when my boss called me and said that she was seriously at my work, asking for me on my day off, and that she said she wasn't leaving until she spoke to me. I told him to call the cops and have her trespassed, which he thankfully did. It was at this point that I called her and screamed at her to leave me the hell alone. I told her that if she didn't stop bothering everyone, I would get a restraining order against her. I told her I just wanted this to be a peaceful breakup and that I really wished her the best, but her future was not with me. Of course, she kept trying to convince me that we were right for each other, that she was my soulmate, that I needed her. I told her no, just pretty much like that, and hung up the phone. At that point, I probably should have contacted the cops and tried to get a no contact order, but honestly, I wasn't sure if they would give me one because she hadn't really broken any laws. She was being annoying and technically harassing me, but there hadn't been any reports of anything yet, and they likely wouldn't be able to do anything about it, and like a dumbass, I let it go and just said that this was the end. Then, about a week later, I realized that it wasn't going to be the end. I had been out most of the night and had been drinking with my friends, just trying to have a great night with the guys. I had pretty much gotten to a mental state where I had forgotten about the whole thing, and I was pretty well happy, especially with whatever I was mixing that night. I was not blackout drunk, but I was definitely feeling it. When I got home that night, everything was as it was supposed to be in my life. My friend Jack dropped me off and made sure I got into my apartment and to bed, and he said that he would lock the door on his way out so that I didn't have to worry about anything. I drunkenly thanked him, and that's the last thing I remember before passing out on my bed. I remember it, so that tells me that I was not blackout drunk, just pretty drunk. When I finally woke up that next morning to my head starting to hurt, I opened my eyes and nearly pissed my pants. As soon as I opened my eyes, I saw Elena in the bed next to me, just staring at me with a creepy smile. I flipped out and asked her what the hell she was doing, and she told me that she was watching me sleep because I look so cute when I don't know what's going on. That told me all I needed to know. I grabbed my phone and I called 911. I told them that my ex-girlfriend had broken into my home and that I needed the police there right away. The whole time I was on the phone with the dispatcher, she was screaming about how she was going to tell the cops that I assaulted her, that I beat her, and other things. She told me that she would make sure I went to prison, again, all while I was on the phone with the dispatcher, so thankfully, they had it on recording. I immediately went outside to wait for the cops and kept the person on the phone until they got there. Of course, this was a mess in and of itself, telling them that she had broken into my apartment while I was home and that I smelled of alcohol as I was drunk the night before. They definitely didn't see the emergency in what I was saying, but I basically said that I wanted her out of my house, the house that my name was on and hers wasn't, and that I wanted to charge her for trespassing. They reluctantly went in and told her to get out, and of course she tried to tell them that I hit her. At this point, it looked like a lover spat to them, so they just did what they could to get her off the property. I thanked them and asked them how to get a restraining order, and thankfully one of the officers did seem to actually see what was going on and gave me the info. After I got the restraining order, she actually seemed to get that it was over, and she didn't bother me much anymore. I have no idea how the hell she got into my house. Jack told me that he made sure he locked the door. All my windows and the back door were always locked, and she didn't have a key, unless she had stolen my key while we were together and made a copy. Thankfully, this was pretty much the end of it all, and I haven't seen her since. The reason this came up was that she actually tried to add me on Facebook recently. I was a bit confused on who it was at first, because the first name was Elena, which told me it was probably her, but her last name was the same as mine. I decided to snoop around on her timeline, and come to find out, she just got out of another relationship and changed her name to mine. What's even funnier, after I messaged her and told her to leave me alone, I saw that she changed her relationship status to "it's complicated." This story happened about a year ago when I was a bartender up in the northeast part of the US. I'm not going to give the specific location for privacy reasons. Just know that it was a fairly decent part of the country in a fairly decent part of the state. The bar itself wasn't one of those snooty, high-class joints where people dress in shiny clothing to go to, but it did have standards, in that people were expected to act civilized and know when to cut themselves off. There was the occasional patron that would drink too much and try to start fights, but our door guy was good at his job, and we were pretty damn close to a police station. My point, if they got out of hand, it wasn't long before we had them under control. I think that's why the bar was actually pretty popular, because it was a chill place where you just hung out and played pool. We also had a pinball room that was pretty legit too. Overall, the 6 years I worked there were decent. We didn't have too many problems, but there was one night that I will absolutely never forget for the entirety of my life. I remember that it was a pretty normal Friday night. We were open for the public, and there weren't any special events planned. Usually these nights were the best. We would get a good crowd, decent tips, and you'd meet some pretty cool people that just wanted to have a good night. The entire evening was going pretty normal until about an hour and a half into the rush crowd. I was sitting there mixing drinks and handing them out when I look over and see that some random guy walked out of the men's restroom completely naked, with the exception of his shoes. This guy was pushing past people as they stared at him, and he was trying his damnedest to get out to the floor. When he got out to the area by the stage, he started busting his ass in some sort of spasm-filled dance, just absolutely losing it. Remember how I said it was a normal night and no events? That meant there was no DJ and no band, meaning that the only music that was playing was going on overhead, and it wasn't loud, nor was it dance-worthy. Despite that, this guy was flaunting his manhood all over the dance floor, in probably the fastest-paced dance I'd ever seen. And it would have been absolutely hysterical had I not been working and had there not been a huge crowd of people trying to enjoy their evenings. When I realized that this guy wasn't going to stop anytime soon and was probably not doing this in sound mind, I decided to step out and get our security on the situation. I walked over to the door and waved down Bert, the door guy, and explained to him, literally saying the following: "Hey Bert, there's a naked guy busting a move on the floor to non-existent music, and while I'm happy that he's having a great time, we should probably get him off the floor." I could see Bert laughing as he nodded, and I went back to my bar to finish what I was doing. When I got back over to my station, the manager informed me that he called the police and that they would be there in only a few minutes. Within a few seconds, I hear a commotion happening, and I assume this guy is giving Bert a hard time. Sure enough, I look up and see that Bert is trying to grab the guy's arm and get him off the floor, and this guy is screaming at Bert that he's ruining his night. Bert tells him that he needs to either leave or put clothes on, and this guy seriously thrashes and decks Bert square in the side of his face. Bert is a big man, and I've never seen him stagger when someone gets aggressive. But this guy apparently had one hell of a right hook, because he was able to knock Bert down. While I wish I could say that he went back to dancing, he didn't. Instead, he made a beeline straight to my bar and started climbing up on it to get away from them, whoever they were. Again, had this not been happening while I was working, I would have been laughing my ass off, but at this point, I didn't really know what to do. After a second or two, Bert got back up and walked to the bar and basically just tried to talk this guy down from the top of the bar. After a bit of back and forth between this guy that is clearly tripping hard and Bert, the guy jumps down and tries to run to the back. Thankfully, Bert grabs him and gets him in a lock. Unfortunately for Bert, this guy wasn't done fighting. At this point, this guy is wailing his arms and legs out in any direction he can, and Bert is trying to carry him toward the door. Out of nowhere, this guy goes full psycho and screeches as loud as he can, then literally sinks his teeth into Bert's arm. Like he literally bit into his arm as hard as he could, to the point that it drew blood and caused Bert to scream in pain. Thankfully, at that moment, the police had entered the building and saw what was happening, though I don't think it was hard to figure out where the situation was. It took 2 officers and a crap load of blasts from a taser to finally get this guy away from Bert and out the door. Thankfully, due to the fact that this guy was clearly on something, they also sent the paramedics. If you're curious, I believe it was bath salts and speed, so this guy was higher than a Zeppelin. The medics came in and checked Bert's arm out. He ended up needing a few stitches and has a permanent scar on his arm from the guy. Honestly, I'm glad that Bert was there and was as tough a guy as he was, because I have this feeling if I had tried to stop this guy, he could have killed me. We ended up closing for the night after the whole thing went down, and the manager actually hired a second doorman for every shift. I guess he figured that having 2 burly guys would be better than just one, and while that was true, we never had another event like that, thankfully. Back in 2016, my family decided to have a family reunion in celebration of my great-grandmother's 100th birthday. I have quite a large extended family with many aunts, uncles, cousins, and great-cousins, so we agreed to have it at a park and do a cookout. Everyone would bring something from sides, drinks, snacks, and desserts, or pitch in for the cost of the meats we'd be cooking there. I was pretty excited myself as I hadn't seen most of them in several years. I used to be really close to some of my cousins, so I was ready to see them and finally catch up. The time came for the party, so my parents, myself, and little sister, with our baked potato salad, made our way to the park. There were already several people there by the time we arrived. Of course, it was a public park, so there were other kids and families on the playground, which was next to the shelter we had rented. As more and more people showed up, I had to go around and say hi, tell everyone how I was doing, and introduce myself to others. Some of the adults started cooking the hamburgers and hot dogs, while the rest of us all sat around talking. When some of my favorite cousins showed up, I quickly ran to hang out with them. I was 15, close to 16 at the time, so we decided to go hang out at the playground since my little sister and younger cousins were over there. On the playground, there was a swing set for 4 kids. One of them was a little toddler-like seat. There was a rock wall that led to the top of the jungle gym where you could walk across this little bridge to a slide and something else, and on the other side by the rock wall was the monkey bars leading into a sand pit. There were some other little nearby things for the younger kids to play with, but this was the main area that we stayed in. Upon walking over there, my mom and sister were in the sand pit playing with buckets that were in there to make a castle. After my mom and cousin talked for a few, she asked me to watch my sister so she could go back over to where my dad was. I agreed, since me and my cousin Tasha wanted to walk away from the adults anyways. So we stayed with my sister and helped build a sand castle. We even partially covered her in sand up to her waist per her request. She liked doing that and then trying to climb out of it. She was weird like that. After a few times, we decided to go sit on the bench, which was opposite of the sandbox. That way I could still see her and we could talk a little more privately. We told each other just about everything, and not being able to see each other meant we had a lot to share. Her mom, my aunt, ended up moving out of the state, and they didn't have a phone that we could talk freely on, so we sent messages through Facebook occasionally. While sitting there talking, we also observed some of the people that were at the park that were not part of our family. Like, there was a little boy sliding down head first, licking the slide on his way. I can't make this up. All this while his mother was arguing with someone on the phone standing next to the slide. We saw a few other kids that were running around together and two that started playing with my sister in the sand. Then we started seeing the strange ones. There was an older, bald guy that showed up, but he stopped and talked to some of my family, so I assumed that he was with us and just another person that I didn't know yet. After a while, he walked over to the park and sat on the bench on the opposite side on his phone. It struck us odd for a moment to have this guy sitting at the park when he didn't appear to have any kids over here. Why would you not be talking with the adults? I asked Tasha if she knew that guy, and she didn't either, but had the same thought as me. So we continued doing what we were doing, all the while people watching, including this guy. After a few, he noticed us looking at him and smiled and waved. Not knowing how to react, we just did the same. Apparently, this was his cue to walk over to us. He said something to the effect of, "Family reunion, eh?" We just smiled and confirmed. Then he asked, "So who do you girls belong to?" Again, based on his questions, we thought he was part of the family, so we told him our parents' names. He then claimed to be my father's and her mother's third cousin and explained that he hasn't been around in a while. We let it go and briefly talked about how old we were, what grade we were in, and the normal things I had already been asked by others. He then said he was going to walk around a bit and waved goodbye. I noticed he walked over to the sand pit and started talking to the kids over there. He then pulled out his phone and took a picture of the 3 kids, maybe as memories, but he didn't even mention taking a picture of us. We continued talking and watching the kids, all while keeping an eye on this guy. He got up from the sand pit and walked away to talk on his phone. I remember he looked annoyed with the call and eventually got off and walked over to the other kids on the playground and started talking to them and actually helping one little girl go across the monkey bars. Now, I know it's probably normal for adults to help little kids around them. After all, I do that too when I'm at the park playing with my sister and a little kid asks for help. It was just a little odd to me that these kids he was picking up weren't part of our family gathering. Something didn't feel right. Something about this situation and this guy didn't sit right with me, and I told Tasha about it and she agreed. I could tell she felt the same too, based on us both losing direction of our conversations. So as I was telling her I was going to ask my dad about it, My sister had come running over, saying she was thirsty. I thought it was perfect timing to walk over there. As we got up from the bench, the guy swiftly walked over to us and said, "I brought some drinks for the party. Could you girls help me bring them over to the shelter?" I forgot to mention the parking lot is quite long, as there's also a walking and bike path, so it expands the whole backside of the two shelters that were there and the playground. There's also an entrance to the park on each side of the parking lot. While most of the family parked closer to the shelter, some had to park further down as it started filling, but this guy parked as far over to the opposite side as he could. He pointed over to where his hatchback was and said he forgot to bring the cooler, so he just had a bunch of 12 packs that he needed help with. Hell no. This was exactly what I was afraid of. Tasha kind of froze, not knowing how to respond to the guy, when I quickly told him my sister wanted to drink, so I'm going to drop her off with my mom first. He tried stopping us, saying she could help carry something else he had brought, to which I don't remember what it was. So instead, I said we weren't allowed to leave the playground, so I would drop off my sister and let them know I was going to be helping. This guy looked pissed. How could someone get so angry at a child just doing as their parents told them to? With his face turning red, I picked up my sister and pushed Tasha ahead of me, and we walked back to our parents. When I got there, I quickly asked my dad, who was talking to someone else, if they knew the bald guy. He looked confused at first, and I told him that he claimed to be his cousin, and explained everything that just took place. My mom looked worried, and right as she was talking about calling the cops, my dad joked that he'd just take care of the guy himself. That's when we started hearing a woman screaming from the park. A lot of us looked over to see what was going on when the woman started shouting, "He has my kid!" Several adults in my family started running over there to see what was going on and to round up the kids still on the playground. We were told to stay at the shelter while they figured things out. Shortly after, the cops showed up and several of us had to give statements, including me and Tasha, because, you guessed it, it was the bald guy. Apparently, when we started walking back, he ended up snatching the little girl that he was helping on the monkey bars, but he let go of her as someone caught up to him and tackled him. He barely got out of the parking lot when another cop was able to stop him. I heard all this from my father as he was talking to other people about it. I was incredibly thankful that Tasha and I stuck to our gut and refused to go with this guy. We have no idea what his plans were after he got one of us, but it's a terrifying thought that I try not to think about. I have a bit of a creepy and short story about my ex-boyfriend. It's one of those stories that was weird to me, and it is creepy, but I genuinely never expected Adam to do what he did, because he didn't seem like he was the type. The year we were together in high school, he was kind-hearted and a sweet guy, so to have him end up so vindictive and aggressively petty was so far out of left field. I guess I should further explain our relationship and Adam as a person to really make it clear that this was weird for him. Adam and I were, as I said, high school sweethearts. We got together junior year and were together all through senior year. He was a smart kid, got good grades, and he and I got along well enough to make it a good relationship. We were one of the couples in high school that everyone knew. Like if you said Megan and Adam, they knew who we were and they knew that we were together. Unfortunately, we ended up growing apart pretty quick after graduation. I had ideas for what I wanted to do, he had ideas for what he wanted to do, and they just didn't mesh together. So we ended up deciding that we would need to go ahead and see other people. I won't get into the specifics of all that. It was sad, but for the best. Skip ahead to about a year later, and I've moved on and not thought about Adam for a while. Not to be rude, but I just moved on with my life and everything was going pretty well for me. I wasn't dating anyone at the time, but I had a few guy friends that I spoke with pretty often and was pretty close to. They knew that I wasn't seeing anyone, and they knew that I wasn't really looking to get with anyone. So imagine my surprise when I get a text back from one of them asking when I got back with Adam. I called him and asked what he was talking about, and he told me that I changed my relationship status on Facebook to being in a relationship with Adam and had been posting pictures of him on my wall all day, talking about how much I loved and appreciated him and how happy I was that we were back together. Big problem with that is that I didn't have a Facebook account. I had one back when I was a freshman, but I had deleted it a long time prior to this conversation, so I asked him for a link. When I tried to visit the account, it was, of course, privated, but the account had my name and an older photo of me. I then asked him to send me screenshots of the page so I could see what they were saying. Sure enough, this page was posting a ton of things about how they loved Adam more than anything, and they were posting a ton of old pictures of us, talking about how happy we were together, and several other things that were really weird. He then said that he had gotten a message from the account, and the person pretending to be me told him that since I was back with Adam, that we couldn't be friends anymore. He messaged them to call him, and the person just said, "Sorry, I can't." What really sucked was that this person had added quite a few people as friends, and apparently it had existed for a couple of months to make it look legitimate. My friends had all accepted the friend request, thinking it was me, but Facebook wasn't a point of conversation, so none of them had told me about it. They just thought it was a normal thing that had occurred. They thought I had started an account to keep in touch and added my friends. I ended up texting everyone that I could to tell them that the person on Facebook was not me and that it was someone that was pretending to be me. I say someone, but I knew who it was. I ended up making an account on Facebook and adding everyone and making a post about how I was not with Adam and that the person that was saying they were me was not me and requested that they block them. Interestingly enough, they blocked me and started posting about how my real account was fake and that they needed to block me. It was almost funny. As messed up as this was, it was a situation that I really couldn't do much about, and I just had to pretty much ignore it. My friend kept the person on their friend list, and even though everyone that they had added had blocked them, they kept on pretending for the better part of a year. They would constantly post about things that they did, things that didn't happen. They posted every month about their month anniversary. They posted about how they were engaged. Adam literally kept this facade up for 10 months before finally abandoning it, and he did so to an audience of nobody except himself and the one friend that kept me looped in. If it wasn't so creepy and sad, it would have almost been funny that he was so obsessed with pretending to be me. In the end, I never contacted him about it because I didn't care. I made sure that everyone knew it was fake and no one fell for it after the beginning. I know some people may say it wasn't creepy, but to me, it was. Adam was clearly not okay, and I never would have expected him to do this, considering how our relationship went when we were together and that our breakup was a completely mutual thing. So that was another set of our notorious true story collection. You know, the ones where it's always a gamble of what kind of stories you'll get. Kind of like those bags of jelly beans. Except I don't put the gross flavors in there. Yeah, talking about you, artificial grape. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if so, go ahead and hit that pretty little like button for me. And if you want to hear more content like this with new flavors, consider subscribing. Or if you're feeling bold, leave me a comment. Do you like jelly beans? Do you dislike them? I don't like them. With that being said, friends, I hope you have a great rest of your week. And until next time, take care.